1. So this is an introduction to the process of 3-step scansion, the 3-step scansion system, which is the simplest, best way of scanning that I have discovered, developed a little bit on my own in a lifetime of teaching meter and scansion. So I'm going to pass it along to you. And it's very simple. We're going to be using just a few symbols to start. There's a few more that you can do at the advanced level, but right now we're just going to be using 3 of them. This one stands for the stressed syllable. I call it a wand. This one stands for the unstressed syllable. I call it a cup. And this one stands for the break between them, and I call that the edge. These simple terms took years and years to discover, and they're so helpful. So I'm just going to put them all here next to each other so you can see them easily and remember. And also, if you're on my Substack, you'll find this actually spelled out for you in more detail under this tab called Scansion on my Substack. So I'm going to be posting this on Substack and maybe also somewhere else. Okay, so these are the tools we'll be using to start with. And this is a poem by Emily Dickinson. And the 3-step method is very simple. You start with the wands, that's step 1. Then you go to the cups, that's step 2. Then you figure out what you're doing with your feet, and you finally do the last step, which is edges. That's it. Wands, cups, edges, in that order. So we start out with this poem by putting in the wands, which are the accent marks, so you can anticipate with me where they're going to go. The Morns are meeker than they were. So first thing to notice is that the word than is not a very strong word. If it was the Morns then meek, that if it happened between morn and meek, you wouldn't even hear it. It would then get a cup. But because it happens between the and the they, it gets a wand, because stress is relative, right? The Morns are meeker than they were. Than sounds nice and strong because it comes right after this little tiny and before this small they. Okay? So the last one we're going to hear a wand here on were. The Morns are meeker than they were. So we've completed step 1. Now we go to step 2. We put in the cups, which is basically usually right on the syllables that didn't get a wand. That's easy enough. It's very important to be able to find your syllables. I recommend brushing up on your syllables, like if you're not sure where they go. For example, right here, meek, meek is a syllable, is a syllable, and you can always look them up in the dictionary to check. So we've now completed step 2, cup, and here comes step 3, the final step, edge. For this step, you have to look where is the pattern, what repeats. So you can just look at it visually, or you can say to yourself, cup wand, cup wand, cup wand, cup wand. It's very clear what the repeating pattern is, so you just put in your edges in between, just like that. Try to line them up right between the syllables. It's a great pleasure to line them up exactly right. So meek, there, I love the way that edge is right between the K and the E. It gives me a real thrill. Meeker than, there's another one. Okay, so now we have completed our scansion. If you want, the final step would be naming. That might be the 4th step. So in this case, we have the name being a combination of the foot and the number of feet. It's iambs, there's 4 of them. This is called iambic tetrameter. Iambic tetrameter. The Morns are meeker than they were. It's 4 iambs in a row, no variations. So that's very easy to scan. We can do the same thing on the next line. Maybe you want to do it first with me. Where are we going to get our wands? Nuts. Get brown. Okay, right? That's pretty easy. Nouns and adjectives and verbs. Like in this line we have a noun, a verb, and an adjective. Those tend to get the big wands because they are the most important words. So there's a logic to this choice of what gets the wands and what doesn't. But the best logic is the logic of your body, so always be sure to say it aloud, say it aloud, say it aloud. 3 times is my recommendation. Speak it thrice for every poem in meter so you can really hear it and feel it. It'll make scansion so much easier. Okay, we've done step 1 and step 2 on this next line. We've got our wands, we've got our cups. And the next line, next step, step 3, put in the edges. Here we go, right? First look for a pattern, then put in the edges. I assume you found a pattern here. Cup 1, cup 1, cup 1. Always, if you have double consonants, the edge always goes right between them if you can make it do that. So, getting brown, okay. And I try to put it in the middle of a word. So on brown, I would put it in the O because that's smack in the middle of the word. And I find that very satisfying. And well scanned line, it just gives you not only that nice feeling of things being in the right place, but also it gives you that sense of, I don't know, kind of adventure, like being ready for adventure. You're ready for the next thing because you've got your wands exactly where they belong. It's like a sort of athletic readiness that happens. And if you get anything from my teaching, I hope it's a sense that meter is a powerful, passionate, juicy, wild, amazing thing that belongs to the people of the planet in our bodies. It is nothing to do with the stereotypical idea that it's somehow restraining or limiting or keeping you down. It is the opposite. It's like feet to run with. It's like food to eat. It is like an empowering thing. And it's not just me saying this, it's every one of the hundreds and thousands of people who have worked with me. It's just true. So, check it out. Sometimes our ego, perhaps buttressed by certain interests in the creative writing industry or other places that want to keep us sort of away from our full power as metrical poets. I think there's something at stake because people think it's hard to learn or they don't know it. It was lost in the middle of the century in the creative writing world, so there's a sort of conspiracy of keeping it away from people, or you always have to subvert it. Try doing it without subverting it and see how it feels, because you may be very surprised. Okay, so I'm going to go faster on this one because I think you probably already got the idea. That's how simple it is. The berry's cheek is plumper. Okay, so here's a line that's a little different. I just pasted in the first line because it's the same as the third line, as you can see, but we have an extra syllable here, an extra cup. So here we introduce a 4th thing, which is the ghost cup. I'll put it up here. The ghost cup is an extra syllable that's not really part of the metrical pattern. It's like a ghost, and so you put parentheses around it. The great thing about this little ghost cup is it works for an extra syllable or a missing syllable. The idea is the same. It's a syllable that's outside of the expected pattern. So that may be helpful again. The rose is out of town. The nuts are getting brown. We can hear that's identical. So if you want to speed it up, you can just cut and paste that. The rose is out. Make sure it's lined up nicely. Of town. Okay. The maple wears a gayer scarf. The field a scarlet gown. Same thing, right? The Morns are meeker than they were. The maple wears a gayer scarf, etc. And so we just finish it off with these 2 lines, which are easy. They're exactly the same as the other ones. So what else do we have? Lest I should be old-fashioned, I'll put a trinket on. Interesting. We can hear it. I'll put a trinket on. The rose is out of town. That is exactly so. By the way, Dickinson was very young when she wrote this, I believe. So it has a beautiful freshness to it. And I think her later poetry is metrically more complex. In fact, I've written about that in some of my books. But this next to last line here is a little bit different. She's got the berry's cheek is plumper in the 3rd line. So far, by the way, this is the only variation we have seen. Is that correct? The Morns are meeker than they were. Yeah, this one syllable here, this little ghost cup, is the only syllable so far that is not exactly in the iambic pattern. However, you will notice there's a difference in length, right? The first line was an iambic tetrameter, and then the second line is shorter, right? If you count, instead of finding 4 iambs, you'll only find 3. So this one is called iambic trimeter. And in fact, this pattern of alternating iambic tetrameter and iambic trimeter is what almost all of Emily Dickinson's poems do. And she gets it from the hymns that she was learning in church. And it was quite sacrilegious, because if you know Dickinson, you'll know that she was not on board with the mass Christian revivals of her time. She was an independent thinker. So for her to choose this meter is actually extremely interesting and powerful, that she chose this Christian meter of all the dutiful hymn singers and used it for her own hymn singing, thus demonstrating, exactly what she says all through her poetry, is that you can find spiritual power in nature or in your own heart or spirit just as much or more so than you can always in institutional religion. So she really was practicing exactly what she preached by choosing this meter for her own direct experience of the Spirit, right? Anyway, let's just look at this last little line here. Lest I should be old-fashioned. Lest I, okay, let's clean it up. Always clean it up so you can see what you're doing when you're scanning. Should be old-fashioned. Okay, this is a little different. Old-fashioned. I think a lot of us, including me, I think would put a wand on the old and on the fash. So in that case, we have a ghost cup, just like this does. And it's usually a good idea. This is optional, but I like to put a foot brake before a ghost cup so that I can see that it's really extra outside the pattern. But that is optional. You don't have to do it. Fashion, old-fashioned. Oh, this is interesting, because actually it's not old-fashioned, is it? So it's not a ghost cup. So instead of, this is really a two-syllable word, fashioned. Oh no, sorry, it is a ghost cup because it's an extra one. Oh, mistake, okay. It is, but look how interesting. The berry's cheek is plumper. Lest I should be old-fashioned. Okay, I'm sorry, I made a mistake there. It is a ghost cup, just like the other one. It's an extra syllable. But the interesting thing here is that she's added another variation. She's added another wand. She's turned this into what we call a spondee, which is a foot that's quite rare in English, because most English words have a stronger stress on one syllable than the other, but a spondee supposedly has two the same. The poet Robert Southey said, he said that the only spondees in English, I think, were Egypt, the word Egypt, and maybe he had another one. But the wisest thing I've ever heard about spondees is it's up to you if you want a spondee to be 2 stresses or 2 equal stresses. Maybe one of them is not quite as strong as the other, but if you don't care about that, you can just say it's 2 stresses, and in that case, whether the old or the fash is stronger, you can still say that it's 2 very strong syllables. So she's added an extra variation here, so it's kind of lovely. Look at her incredible discipline and control here. In the entire poem, there's only this one little extra cup on the plumper, and doesn't that give us the idea of it's even extra plump? Like, it's so plump it doesn't fit on that one line. It's just a beautiful example of what they call expressive variation. So the final step after you name your meter is to think about why. To go back and reflect. I'm going to say name and reflect as your final step, because you want to. What is the name of this meter? This is iambic tetrameter alternating with iambic trimeter, which we call ballad meter is a good name for it. There's several names for it, but I'm just going to give you my favorite name for it, which is ballad meter. So ballad meter is an alternating of iambic tetrameter and trimeter. So in this ballad meter poem, you can say it's very regular, iambic tetrameter and trimeter alternating, but it does have one extra syllable ending, which we mark with a ghost cup. And it also has, two extra syllable endings, one in the first stanza, one in the second stanza. And it also has one spondy. Those are the only variations. So that's a name and a description. And then to reflect on the final step of scansion is to think about why. What does it mean? It's not just, mechanical. Sometimes they say just to add variety. I mean, in a good poem, it's not just doing that. It's also doing something that words cannot do, giving you a physical experience. So in this case, I would say we have this little playing with plumper, this almost teasing, plumper, ooh, I could go outside the meter, but I'm not going to. And then in the next to last line, the penultimate line, lest I should be old-fashioned, this beautiful spondy, and then it's like, she wants to be modern, right? So she doesn't want to be old-fashioned. So she's put on a little trinket, and to me this is the trinket. This spondy followed by this ghost cup is the trinket that she puts on to show that she's not completely old-fashioned, that she can also make variations. For a very, very young poet, I think she may have been about 18 when she wrote this. It's just so charming, I think, that she's sort of playing with her power to vary and change the meter just at the time that she's first discovering the use of ballad stanza as her own meter. So a wonderful poem. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy 3-step scansion. It is really the cat's pajamas, I'm telling you. It will just take you places you never imagined. 3-step scansion, when you get into really elaborate scansions, it will stand by you, and it's just incredibly helpful. And if you want to learn more about scansion and the 3-step method and lots of examples of scan poems, feel free to check out my little book, which is called How to Scan a Poem, and you can find it all over the web, Amazon, etc., and I'll try to put the link somewhere too. Okay, bye.